Welcome to Dear Alice, a lifestyle approach to interior design.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dear Alice. We are so glad that you're here today. We've got a really fun guest on. I'm so excited. She is somebody that is known for mixing vintage with contemporary. So we're going to be having Ariel Okin on and talking to her about how she balances old with the new. But before we get into that, I want to know from you guys, do you feel like as designers and creators that you have a personal calling card or a signature move that you look for or reach for as part of your work brand?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the more you do it, I've been out of school for 20 years. So I'm like, you get into your groove and you finally figure out like, what is your style? And like, you really, it's evident in your own home and how you design things, what you're drawn to. But I think like in every room, like for me especially, I love one-of-a-kind pieces. I love something that's just a little weird and has some shock value, which usually means that it is a one-of-a-kind piece. It's older, it has history to it, and people have to ask about it because there's a story to be told.
Yeah.
So I think that's my calling card. And I think when I'm working with clients too, I always want something in there. I want something in there that's a little weird.
Yeah.
That's just like, tell me about this piece. Like it makes your eye doesn't want to necessarily stop, but once you settle in, you're just like, you find the details and you're like, tell me about that. So yeah, I love a one-of-a-kind piece. So
lots of characters.
Yeah, lots of character. I love art. I love people. So finding out, I guess, what the client's comfortable with, how weird they want to go, you know, like do they like portraits, whatever it is. I think if you can like flex that muscle to really describe what they're into, I think it's worth doing because it tells a lot about them. So
yeah. It's like the wrong shoe theory.
Yeah, totally.
Suzanne leans way into that for like wrong.
I love a hero with a hero.
That's right.
I love a one-of-a-kind with a one-of-a-kind.
Yeah,
so
it gives it strength.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's a curiosity collection, really.
Yeah.
It's really fun. So I would say that is like what I'm drawn to, what I light up.
Yeah.
That's my calling card. What about you?
I like that. I feel like, after doing this for so long, we probably go through different phases. And right now I'm really loving restraint and strength. Like a real editor's eye on things and like pulling stuff away is feeling good. Like Daryl Carter, how strong his design is. I love the men designers, the Thomas O'Briens and Stephen Gambrell. But I like something that is, I like kind of a power move right now that's handsome and strong. And I'm just finding myself in my own home just peeling away some of the decorating, if you will, and just letting it be like handsome and strong. And then, of course, throwing something organic in the mix to give it a wild line. Yeah, for sure. I also love a one-of-a-kind thing just because we're in this industry. So I don't want it to so much look like a catalog of pieces and like, some of the brands we carry. I want it to feel like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you got it in a distant land.
Yeah.
Or something. And uncovered it.
Totally. Corey, how about you?
I would say like in my own spaces, I love to incorporate something new that reminds me of my past. So I know I've talked about it on the podcast before, but like my master bedroom, or bathroom rather, the tile is like the shell pink color. It is pretty much the same exact color that this like base that I bought when I was a kid. I sold my like first car for it and I started skateboarding everywhere again to like have this base. So yeah, I don't know. It just kind of like reminds me where I came from. And then, but it's also like, like how far I've come. Yeah. You know what I mean? So just like a tip of the cap just to
keeping it real.
Exactly. Yeah. Of like who I was. So
I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's mine.
So good. Okay, well, speaking of signature brands, we have Ariel Okin here. She's the founder of Ariel Okin Interiors, a full-service design firm based out of New York City. Her work has been featured in Arc Digest, Elle Decor, House Beautiful, Domino, and Vogue. And she is the editor-in-chief of Fenimore Lane, an e-commerce and editorial website. And Ariel hosts an amazing podcast you all need to tune into because we know you like a design podcast. It's called Talk Shop, where she talks with some of the greats in our industry about design philosophies. I'm hanging on every word. And she's had just like some of the people that we've admired our whole life on. Just super fun. Ariel's style is feminine and traditional. It's grounded in historical elements while carrying a freshness that's inviting and comfortable. And that is her personal design calling card. Ariel has a knack for mixing the vintage and contemporary, and she has some guiding principles for balancing old and new for the projects that she takes on. So we're super excited to talk to her more about that. Welcome, Ariel, to Dear Alice.
Hi, that was so nice. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we're so tickled to have you here. And I can't wait for our listeners. If you haven't already discovered Talk Shop, you guys are going to just love it. It's so fun.
That is really kind. Thank you so much. And likewise, I have been listening to your podcast for years now. So I'm really, really thrilled and happy and excited to be here.
Oh, good. Well, and if you guys are on a walk or out listening or whatnot, or if you're driving and come to a stoplight, you need to open up her Instagram real quick so you can get a feel for her style. And it is at Ariel Okin, right? On Instagram.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Ariel is Ariel and Okin's Okin. So that'll just kind of give you a quick visual as we're talking to her about her signature style. So yeah, let's get into it.
It's fun because like as you look at your spaces too, they feel like you could go in there and have really good conversations. So I'm really excited to talk
That's
about.
So sweet.
I'm like,
Thank you.
Again, it doesn't feel like something that's brand new, but it doesn't feel stodgy and too like stuffy and old. But it feels really comfortable. Like anybody of any age can go in there and relate to something. So I'm really excited to kind of dig in and see kind of what is your formula, what makes the magic happen. So
yeah, thank you. Also, that's like the nicest compliment that I could receive about our work, because I really always want the spaces that we design to ultimately facilitate life happening in them. So to say that it looks like you could have a good conversation is a great compliment.
My favorite kind of space.
Yeah.
My first question is, when you start any project, Ariel, like where do you draw your personal inspiration from for your client? Like how do you get inspired to start?
Yeah, I always pull inspiration from our client first. I mean, first and foremost, I want our projects to feel like their owners. And so it's super important for me to do a big deep dive on who they are, how they like to live, what palettes they're gravitating toward, how they intend to use the spaces that we're designing. So when we start every project, when I get an inquiry, I have sort of like an intake formula email that I'll send back where I ask them to send some inspiration images to make sure that we're aligned too in terms of aesthetic. And then if we do end up working together, then I'll have them send a few more, and then we put together a creative brief to kick off every project. And that is a mood board for every space in the house. It's usually like an hour to 2 hour meeting. And we really just go over all this imagery, and we try to pull out as much information as we can from them on, you know, what do you like here? What don't you like here? What are you responding to? So that when we do start sourcing, we can, you know, ideally, hopefully hit the nail as close to the head as possible, because we've had a very deep dive conversation.
Yeah, that's so important to kind of align yourself before you can even start the design.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, you know how much work goes into putting together a whole home presentation, and to go into it not entirely sure where their preferences lie is not only a waste of, you know, your time as a designer, but also the client's time, and they're getting billed for it. So it's definitely important to start with them.
Nice. I love that.
Yeah.
During that like debrief, do they like bring like, I'm so curious because we have some clients like bring out a collection. You're just like, oh, I had no idea that was in you.
Yeah.
Like, is there ever like any, I don't know, fun stories about like that design inspiration?
Yeah. One time we got a Dropbox folder of like 320 photos, and none of them had any cohesive, it was just like a big Pinterest dump basically. But it was interesting because we actually sat with her and went through every single picture in our office and wrote down what she was gravitating toward. And then we were able to help her make a theme, you know, and then from there we edited it down, and sort of like what you were saying about paring back, like we sort of took away the excess of the imagery that wasn't landing and turned it into something that made sense. So that was fun and funny when we got that many pictures.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that would have to be like therapy for her. Just
I
like
know.
really
Oh,
figuring
yeah.
out what she
Big
wanted to move
unload.
forward to with. Yeah.
Literally,
Yeah.
100%. And some people are, some people are so decisive, and then some people don't, internally, I'm sure they know what they want because they can gravitate it toward when they see it, but they can't articulate it.
Yes. I think that's why photos are so important, because we could
Yes.
describe a photo with 1,000 words, but they need to be able to see visually what we're talking about, and we're connecting
Yes.
on the visual because they don't know the vernacular to describe what's happening in that photo.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I want to know, where does your love of vintage come from?
Oh, I grew up going with my mom to like every flea market and vintage shop. And my mom was the fashion director for Macy's when I was really little,
No way.
nationally. And then she left when I was about 3 or 4. But she has a great eye, and she worked in fashion, and she's actually an interior designer now, which was like a later in life career for her.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. But she just has a great eye, and she used to just bring me with her everywhere.
Cute.
So that's sort of where it came from.
I love that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Such a good answer.
Oh, I love that. When you are mixing, because I think one of the things that I've read, it's like when you're mixing old with new, there's like this tension that you're always looking for of like, I think probably making space livable. And so some pieces are going to be modern and comfortable. And then you're adding in antiques. Like, what is your formula? Like, if somebody loves this look that you're giving out, what strikes that balance of like old and new to you when you're working on a project in each space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you're thinking about constructing your room, thinking about silhouettes in terms of the lines of your sofa, the silhouettes of your lighting, each of those tells a story. So if you're pairing, for example, a very traditional English roll arm sofa with a very classic bell jar light fixture, you're leaning in towards a very traditional territory. So how do you when you think of like yin and yang, like having that tension is what makes things interesting, whether it's in fashion or in art or in our case in interiors. So when you have things like that, setting it off a little bit, whether it's a contemporary photograph of photography or artwork of some kind or a really hypermodern light fixture, just pairing things that wouldn't 100% you would think would go together, but feeling comfortable enough to take the risk to say, hey, I'm going to mix something that feels out of genre is sort of how you get that layered, accumulated, this came together over time look versus something that can sometimes feel like you went into a store and bought, whatever was on the floor, which is also totally fine.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. So
That's fair.
I have a question. What is your formula for how much old is too much?
I don't really have a limit, honestly. I mean, if something is in good quality and, and it looks beautiful, I don't think there's anything wrong, because even if something's old per se, like let's say it's vintage or it's antique, it doesn't necessarily mean it looks fusty or old or traditional. It could be mid-century. It could have, contemporary lines to it. So I don't really think there is a limit, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's more sustainable. It's good for the planet to shop
Amen.
that way.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Agreed.
I love that.
Yeah.
I know, even when you're like mixing in contemporary, because I think that's something that a lot of people like, theoretically could be like, I love that look, but it's hard because it's not like it's just like you pull the first like modern piece and throw it in there and it works. Like there's some studying, right? That it takes.
Yeah. And you have to shop around with vintage and antique. You have to physically go and see it. You have to go into the shops. I think one of the most valuable pieces of advice that I've learned from chatting with people on our podcast too is like, you have to go out and shop in person. You have to touch the things, you have to touch the fabrics, you have to sit in the sofas, you have to feel the upholstery. And so I think physically doing it is really important, especially and particularly for vintage, because, something could be represented one way on Cherish or First Dibs, and then it gets dinged in transit and it looks completely different when it arrives because it's shipping from overseas. So, I think that's really important too.
Yeah. Shopping.
Yeah. Where do you shop? Or vintage, like depends on
Everywhere.
the project. Everywhere. Okay, yeah, give us a peek into that world.
We love Antique and Artisan in Stamford, Connecticut. It's a great, huge warehouse filled with wonderful things. Run by, I believe it's John Rosselli's niece, actually. But just a wonderful eye, and there's so many great sellers in there and dealers. Great Barrington has excellent antiquing. We've gone to shops in Newport. I mean, we really shop all over. And then we love First Dibs and Cherish, and we shop a ton internationally. We buy a lot from Lorford's in England.
Fun.
So yeah, really all over.
Does the client ever go with you to go
No.
antique shopping, or is that just like a no? It'll be too overwhelming.
I think that it's overwhelming when clients are presented with, especially when you're going to a place like, Antique and Artisan, which is 10,000 square feet, and jam-packed. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. I mean, if someone asked me, I would never say no. But I have only gone shopping once with one client early on in my career. She asked to come with us to the D&D, and it like sent her into a tailspin. Like she was like redoing everything we had originally decided on. And I think for some people, seeing too many options is almost like detrimental because they just can't make a decision. But if you are very decisive, I mean, the more the merrier. We would love to have people come.
Okay, you've found that women love perfect, shiny metals, but you're consistently pushing your client to embrace more patina. How come?
It's not even necessarily metals per se, but I do think that people oftentimes have this like, not an idea of perfection, but that everything should be new and shiny and fresh out of the box. And especially when you have young kids, like I have an almost 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, having things in your house that have patina, over time, your house will age better because the pieces are dinged up already. And not in like a, obviously like you don't want to have something that's falling apart and looks terrible, but beautiful patina, right? Like wood that has sat for 200 years and is sun bleached. Like you can't replicate that with something new. And the quality of furniture today is, I mean, there are places that make beautiful furniture, but I'm talking mass market, big box furniture is nothing like what they used to make, in the 50s and the 60s and before. I mean, so I think not being afraid of having a little patina in your house goes a long way. It gives it character, helps add layering to your house. It helps you in the long run if you're a house that has littles or pets. So don't be afraid of a little scratch here and there.
I feel like the storytelling with like pieces like that is really great. As far as just like even without humans in there, the room is talking. Like it's telling
it gives
a story.
It character.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But also like
it gives a character.
Like who doesn't want to be like, oh man, like this piece is like, you're not going to say that about something that you just like pulled out of a box.
It's
you're
from
like,
the
oh,
Titanic.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know,
I know.
like-
It's like, oh, wait till you hear the story behind this. It was built 6 months ago in China. You know what I mean? Like no one says
Yes.
I know. You can still
Yeah.
see some of the foam on the corners. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the handmade element too. Like a lot of these pieces that are true antiques. I mean, you can see the physical craftsmanship in them. And vintage pieces too. So I found a piece at auction in my house. It's a tortoise. It's a hand painted tortoise cabinet. So it's like this big wood cabinet, but it's got a hand painted tortoise, like faux painting on it. And I found it at auction for $127. And it's like my favorite piece in my house. It's so great. And we turned it into a bar.
Done.
So, be on the hunt. Also, it's a great, like auction houses are a great place to find stuff like Live Auctioneers and Town and Sea, Doyle. There's so many good ones.
I think that's a good tip. I think when people hear auction, they're just like, oh, that's out of my league. I don't know if I can go to the auction. Like
there's so many great ones.
Physically, or are they online auctions, or how are you doing it?
Live Auctioneers is online.
Okay.
Town and Sea is online. Yeah.
What was that last one? Townsies? Is that what you said?
It's called Town and Sea.
Okay.
And they are based in Connecticut, and she has a great eye, and they go to estate sales and get some really great stuff. That's
And is
Town
that
and Sea is where I
online,
got
or
the,
is that?
yes, it's online.
Oh, great.
And that was where I got my tortoise bar cabinet.
I'm so
at
happy
auction.
for you. You're gonna have to text us a picture of that. We should
I
show
will.
that to
It's
the
very
listeners.
cool.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So good.
Kids are gonna fight over that one someday.
For sure.
Man.
For sure. How do you know when a room is complete?
You know, I don't know if a room ever is 100% complete. I think we are all evolving, and so our homes are evolving, and that's okay. I do think when a room still feels empty.
Yes.
If the walls aren't fully fleshed out, or if there's a space, something that I'm really big on is there always has to be a place for someone to put their drink, which is sort of like a Bunny Williams-ism that I've picked up from reading her books so many times over the years. But, a floor plan needs to feel fleshed out in the sense that you've got a place to put your drink and people can have a nice conversation. And so when there's voids in the floor plan, I think that's how you can tell that maybe something's missing. But I think a room starts to feel complete when there's a place for everything, it's comfortable, and that last layer is in, like the blankets and the soft goods and the layered books and art and things like that. I think that last bit is crucially important for something feeling finished and personal.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Amen.
I love that. Now, opposite of complete, in getting started, what pieces do you start with? Are you going antique shopping first? Are you starting with the rug? Are you starting with any?
So
yeah,
I always start with a floor plan. So we go from the creative brief into really thinking like, how are these people going to live in their home? Then we draw out our floor plans, and then everything starts with the floor plan, and then I go from there into textiles. So I do floor plan textiles, and when I do textiles, I do carpet at the same time. So I like scheme textiles, wallpaper, carpet all together, but my floor plan comes first. And that way I sort of know, it gives you the framework of what you need to be looking for.
Yeah.
Then I'll go shopping, and that's the most fun part.
Yes, agreed.
Find all the things you never knew you needed for that room.
Yeah,
sure. Like I had no idea I needed that crest or whatever it is you find.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the end part I think is really fun when you're styling. We, at the start of every project, we make a mock FF&E budget that's based off, what similarly scoped projects in the past have been. And we leave 10% of the entire FF&E budget for accessorizing.
Smart.
And then we that those numbers become more concrete as we start purchasing and things become real. And then things get fleshed out in that budget as things move along. But the accessorizing is really important.
Yes, totally. It looks like somebody lives there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that you put a number too. I think that's good for people just to know, it's okay. You're going to spend some money on accessories, and that's a vital layer.
Yeah.
It is
going to finish. It won't feel finished if you don't do it.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. And after doing a bunch of projects where we didn't have the accessorizing conversation at the outset, and then at the end, it didn't feel done until we shot it. And then they ended up buying all the accessories that we brought in for them because we were shooting it. I realized that it's really important to have that as part of the conversation up front and have it baked into the FF&E budget from the outset, because that's the magic moment. Like when you have all the art up and the mirrors and the linen towels in the powder room and everything sort of set, I think then it feels like a home.
You can host a party finally.
Agreed.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I want to dip into your portfolio. We have a couple pictures here, and I think it'd be fun for you to sort of describe these scenes. Of what we've got. We have this podcast. You can also watch it on YouTube. So those of you that are watching can see these images, but if not, she's going to describe some of these beautiful rooms that she's completed and shot.
This is one of this darling green mudroom with the blue and white striped. Tell us this.
That is my house, actually. That's my mudroom.
You're so lucky. It's so cute.
Thank you. That room, my house, when we moved in, was entirely beige. And it had sat on and off the market for 7 years.
Wow.
And couldn't sell. And I walked in it May of 2020. So like thick of COVID.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this is the house. We only looked at one house.
Wow.
And then
Crazy.
we just jumped and bought it.
One. It just takes one, my friend.
We walked in and we were like, this is it. We're moving. We're leaving the city.
So fun.
And
And where's your home located? What city are you in?
we're in Westchester, so the suburbs of New York.
So good.
Yeah, I'm about an hour outside of the city. And I really wanted, so that mudroom in real life is very dark, lighting wise, and it was very beige. And so I love Farrow & Ball's closet stripe wallpaper. It's super tailored. It's really pretty. The stripe is like a really pretty pale blue, and it looks like it has some hand to it. Like you can see the brushstroke in the stripe. So I knew I wanted to use that in there. And then it kind of spiraled from there. And I love breakfast room green, which I painted all the millwork in. And then I added in the rattan, and I love wicker and rattan and anything that's kind of like a natural fiber that has texture. So you can see, you know, we have the jute scalloped rug, and it's just, I wanted it to be happy. We don't really use our front door. So our mudroom is really like our foyer. So I wanted it to feel really warm and happy and inviting. We have 2 little kids, so it needed to be functional with like hooks to put their backpacks and stuff on. But I also wanted it to feel cozy.
Looks like you walked into like an English hat box or something. It's so
Thank you. That's so nice.
So cute. And the little custom lampshades and
Yes.
So good.
I'm very, very influenced by English design in general. I think there's such a special way that they live in the UK, and that they place an emphasis on home design, and they mix contemporary and traditional really well.
So well.
That's so good. Okay, tell us about, is this the tortoise cabinet?
Yes, that's my living room. That's the tortoise cabinet I was telling you about. I also collect Nantucket baskets. So those are like the little woven Nantucket baskets on top of it.
So cute.
Up there. Yeah. I mean, this is a pretty good example of mixing modern and traditional. Like you get a little bit of the contemporary with a gleam. I think using something like a Dury just kind of gives a little bit of a fresher, airier feel than using something that feels really traditional, like an ushak or something that's heavier and wool. And then the silhouette of the coffee table is, you know, inspired by Parsons-esque lines and Chippendale-esque lines. So it kind of blends contemporary and traditional. And the rattan chairs have a little bit of a mid-century vibe, which are vintage from Circa Who. So it's a mix of everything.
So cute.
Sorry, my dog spotted a squirrel. If you can see, he was looking out the window.
Get him, buddy.
So cute. Okay, this moment, is this your house also?
Yes. So that's the opposite side of that room.
Okay.
And so another thing that I think is nice about mixing traditional and contemporary is, you know, the upholstery ground that I used in the room is all white. There's no pattern. So it doesn't feel overwhelming, but then you do have the chintz and the pillows, and the Suzani and the layering. And
you did.
So that's another tip, I think. And then the art is, my mom actually saved all of the art from the house I grew up in. My parents sold the house in 2013. And my mom put it all in a storage unit in Philly for me and saved it for 10 years until I had my own home. And almost 10 years. We moved in 2020, almost 10 years. But yeah, she saved it for a really long time for me. So that's a lot of the art in my house is from her.
It's got to be such a special memory.
Pro tip,
that.
guys. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
Get your
it's special.
parents' old things or grandma's old things.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
makes
it's
it feel like
really
home, I'll bet.
Yes. And it's really, really important to me to see that stuff because my kids grow up with it and they know the story behind it. And, you know, they know that those pictures in our living room used to be in the living room in my house, growing up. So I think design can be a way to tell family stories too.
I
think
love that.
That's the essence of time, like timelessness. People are always so worried about like doing something that's not timeless. They want everything to be timeless. And like, that is a surefire way. Your art and what's on your wall and telling your story, that should be timeless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get asked all the time about trends, and I hate to be like a Debbie Downer, but I'm like the least trend following person when it comes to interiors, because your home is the biggest investment that you're going to make, and following a trend is a surefire way to want to redo your room in like 2 years. And also trends, the way they're going with TikTok and algorithms, I mean, everything is just sort of clickbait. So it's like, what do you really like? And what are you finding interesting versus what is everybody else telling you should like?
Yeah, you won't feel at home.
Yeah.
If you're doing that. So I love that. Agreed.
Okay, is this that mud hall again with that darling striped wallpaper?
Yeah, that's the mud room. That lamp is from my collection with Mitzi. Those blue tie-dye lamps are also from my collection with Mitzi.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I love the shade shape that you chose to do.
Thank you.
I feel like that feels very historic. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah. It's also, I think like a clean empire shade versus, I don't like a drum shade. The girls on my team know I'm very anti-drum shades.
Yeah. We could cheers to that for sure.
That. So I think there's something cool about like a more neutral empire that has some texture against a more classic silhouette, whether it's a cord or something like that.
So good.
Yes. And tell us about this room.
That house was such a dream to work on. That is a house in New Canaan that we designed for a young family. They have 2 young boys, and she just is such a dream. She knew exactly what she wanted. She had excellent taste. And that is their family room. So, it's the room that they spend the most time in. I follow her, all my clients on Instagram, and I love seeing when they're actually using their spaces and when they send me pictures of them using it. And she sent me a picture. She and her mom were watching the Oscars in that room together, and they had champagne out and the fire was going and they were watching the Oscars together. And it just made me so happy, because that's why we do what we do.
Yeah. It's the backdrop.
Yeah. You get that snapshot of real life happening. And you're like, yeah, it's working.
It's special.
Right? It's her. Yeah. And you see her having her moment in it. And it's like,
because
for designers.
The whole basis for what we're doing when we design is to envision how they're going to utilize the space, right? So when we see them actually utilizing it, it's like we've created a movie set for our clients to like live their lives on. It's really special.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about your podcast. I mean, that's how like we kind of like were awakened to what you do, and then we learned that you do interiors, but your podcast is such a valuable resource for interior designers. I think so often people want to know, like, how do you do what you do? And you've gotten so many greats on your podcast. Will you tell us about like how that started, why you do what you do, and just so that all the design lovers as well as designers can like, I don't know, tune in and like give them a little feel of what they'll learn and what you're trying to, get out of your guests and everything.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, first of all, thank you. It's very kind of you to say. So I started Fenimore Lane, which is our editorial site. And our podcast is a Fenimore Lane production, in 2020. And
what is Fenimore Lane? Is that where you grew up?
Lane is the name of the street I grew up on. Yeah.
Okay.
Really
yeah. And the house I grew up in left a very, very profound impact on me before I even realized that I wanted to be a designer. I went to undergrad for journalism, and then I went and got my master's in public affairs, and I was working, and I've worked in politics, I worked in education. So I never thought I wanted to become a designer, and I became a designer sort of by accident because friends would, ask for help and stuff. So I have been writing for a very long time. And during the pandemic, a lot of the outlets that I freelance for were not taking freelance submissions because they were only paying in-house writers that were on staff. And so I started Fenimore Lane so that I could still write the stories that I wanted to write, and I didn't have to stop writing. And we started it with a series called Talk Shop. And the series sort of asks people in the design community lots of questions about how they got their start, where their inspiration comes from, how they run their businesses, all kinds of things. And the goal with the series was really to shine a light on creatives in the industry, kind of get to know them a bit better. And it pretty quickly became our most popular series. I mean, we cover the whole living vertical on Fenimore Lane. It's not just interiors. We do a little bit of cooking, a little bit of style, a little bit of, all kinds of stuff. And that one really always had the most traffic. And it got to a point where we had interviewed like over 300 Talk Shop interviews over the course of 3 or 4 years. And I was thinking, like, how do we bring this, to a wider audience? How do we bring it to like a multi-sensory level? And so it made sense to bring the series into a podcast format for some of our really incredible guests who we just wanted to hear more from. And so I had the idea, I would say about 1.5 years ago, and we launched a little over 1 year ago. We have a fantastic producer who helped me get off the ground, who's amazing, Judy, who I love. And the editorial team at Fenimore Lane is incredible and has been with me since I started it. So I feel really lucky that we have a great team. And then I feel really lucky that a lot of my friends said yes to come on. So season 1, the first guest was Paloma Contreras, who's a friend of mine and has been a mentor of mine for years. And the first big feature I ever had was on Paloma's blog, which was a very long time ago. And Paloma had a fantastic podcast called The Style Files, which I was really lucky to be a guest on. And so I thought she made sense to be the first guest. And then we kind of went from there, and then we asked a bunch of people if they wanted to be on, and it sort of just snowballed. And I think one of the big takeaways that I always tell people is don't be afraid to send a cold email. You never know what'll come out of it.
Great advice.
We have some really great guests lined up for season 3. We've Ben Pentreath is going to be on, like so many great guests. So I'm really excited, and I enjoy it. I mean, I learned so much from talking to people in the industry, and Heidi Callie and I talked, and we didn't realize that we were both at Home Polish at the same time. That's amazing. On different coasts. Wow. Like we had no idea. I forgot that we both forgot that we were both at Home Polish at the same time.
Wow. All the lives we live. Isn't it wild?
It's fascinating.
So many chapters. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite guest when you or a favorite interview when you're in it that you're like, this is so good. I love this.
They're all so fun to do because I genuinely come away with a takeaway every single time, because you're talking to people who do the same thing that you do. Totally. So you learn so much about how they got their start, how they run their day to day, where they find inspiration. And so it's been really, really informative for me to do, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's so great.
Has there been one? I mean, we talked briefly about you mentioned Benny Williams. Is there any that you're just like, you geeked out, like just
Gil Schaefer?
Okay, cheers. That's a good one.
For those that are listening that don't know who Gil Schaefer is, tell them.
Gil Schaefer is, I would say Gil Schaefer and Peter Penoyer too. Both. I geeked out on both. They're sort of like, the preeminent classical American architects of our time. And just absolutely brilliant, and have worked on some of the most important projects in the country. And Gil is really like the king of American residential design. So architecture. So I was incredibly nervous to speak with both of them, and they could not have been nicer or more intelligent and humble and informed and just willing to teach truthfully. And I mean, I've read every single one of their books, so it was definitely a fangirl moment.
Everyone start with that one.
Yes.
That's where you shall start.
Yes.
Yes.
So good.
Amazing.
We're going to ask you a question we ask everybody that comes on Dear Alice. And that is, how do you define luxury?
I love that question. I think luxury comes from comfort. I think when you feel comfortable, and that doesn't even necessarily mean something that is luxe, but necessarily like it just feels luxurious to feel comfortable, whether that's
Great
with the
answer.
people that you're with and your relationships that you have and your friendships, or the way that your home is designed so that it's perfect for you and you feel comfortable in it. I think the thoughtfulness that goes behind comfort is luxury.
Great
Beautiful
answer.
answer.
Yes.
Thank you.
I know. So good.
So good.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. If you guys want to see more of her projects on Instagram, again, check out at Ariel Okin. And if you enjoyed this conversation, we would love to receive a 5-star rating from you. And we would love your feedback as well, especially if you have a topic idea for the podcast or a question that we can help you out with. Just send an email to dearalice@alicelanehome.com. We would love it. Otherwise, your question could be a topic for a future Dear Alice podcast, which is always our favorite episodes. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we will catch you next time. Hey, thanks for listening. If you like our show, please leave a 5-star rating.